promised to guard him, saying, "No gun will ever kill you. I will take the bullets from the guns of the Mexicans, and I will guide your arrows." Whether real or not, the spectral voice kept up its end of the bargain. Geronimo was shot many times, but no gun ever killed him. On at least one occasion, the Apache warrior ran out of arrows while fighting Mexican soldiers, so he just charged them with fire and fury smoldering in his eyes, zigzagging his way through the hail of bullets and killing them all up close with his knife. Well, let's not sugarcoat this. Geronimo and his band of warriors killed a lot of people, and not all of them were soldiers armed and ready for a fight. Here's how just one of Geronimo's raids went in the summer of 1866, as told by the man himself. "I took 30 mounted warriors and invaded Mexican territory. We went south through Chihuahua as far as Santa Cruz, Sonora, then crossed over the Sierra Madre Mountains, following the river course at the south end of the range. We kept on westward from the Sierra Madre Mountains to the Sierra de Saharipe Mountains and followed that range northward. We collected all the horses, mules, and cattle we wanted and drove them northward through Sonora into Arizona. Mexicans saw us at many times in many places, but they could not attack us at any time, nor did any troops attempt to follow us. When we arrived at homes, we gave presents to all, and to the tribe feasted and danced. During this raid, we had killed about 50 Mexicans. This is how things went for the next 15 years or so. The Mexicans killed the Apache, and the Apache killed the Mexicans in return. They were trapped in a vicious cycle of death where each side felt justified in striking the other, either as revenge for a previous attack or to stop a new one. There was an attempt at reconciliation in 1873. The Apache and the Mexicans met as Casas Grandes in Chihuahua sat down together and agreed to a peace treaty. Just for a little moment, it looked like it might be possible to end the violence between the two sides, but in the immortal words of Admiral Akbar, "It's a trap!" Once the treaty had been signed, the Mexicans brought out the mezcal to celebrate. Not one to turn down booze, the Chiricahua got nice and drunk, and when they were all wasted, 2 companies of Mexican soldiers stormed the town and massacred them. Geronimo was among the lucky ones who managed to escape, but it left his band of Apaches severely weakened and put an end to the raids for the time being. And if that wasn't bad enough, he also had to contend with a new threat from the other side. During Geronimo's time, the Don Coe people usually divided their time between the territories of Arizona and New Mexico, with occasional incursions into the northern Mexican states to conduct raids. At first, this was all lands that Mexico laid claim over, but the landscape changed drastically during the late 1840s, thanks to the Mexican-American War. After a decisive victory for the United States, the two countries signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, according to which Mexico not only recognized Texas as belonging to the United States of America, but also ceded a gigantic stretch of land that makes up most of today's American Southwest. This included the land of the Apache and many other Native Americans, and with the California gold rush in full swing by the 1850s, the two sides were soon at odds with each other as they fought over territory. Surprisingly, Geronimo was not among the first to take on the American army. Instead, throughout the 1850s and 1860s, other Apache leaders such as Mangus Coloradas and Cochise were the ones who resisted American encroachment. We've already mentioned how that ended for Coloradas, but Cochise somehow managed to avoid a similar grisly fate. After over a decade of fighting, the U.S. Army tooth and nail, he signed a peace treaty in 1872 and lived his last years quietly, dying of natural causes in 1874. During the mid-1870s, the government set up the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona and wanted to move all the Chiricahua Apache there. As you might imagine, being confined to such a single area was anathema to many Native Americans who were used to roaming the lands completely free. It's not like the reservation was particularly nice either. It was an arid wasteland where food shortages and disease were rampant, truly deserving of the nickname that it earned, Hell's 40 Acres. In a shocking twist that nobody could have seen coming, many Apache refused to go along with this plan and immediately rebelled against the US government, preferring to live as outlaws if it meant keeping their nomadic way of life. At this point, there were 3 men that the Chiricahua Apache turned to for guidance. One was Geronimo, who, although not a tribal chief, had earned enough respect that his word carried a lot of weight. The other 2 were actual chiefs, and their names were Jur and Taza. The latter of these was the eldest son of Cochise, and of the 3, he was the one most willing to try and adapt to a new lifestyle if it meant peace for his people. He traveled to the San Carlos Reservation willingly, taking with him about a third of the Chiricahua. Afterward, he even went on a delegation to Washington, D.C., where he quickly fell ill with pneumonia and died, so not exactly an auspicious sign for the Apache-American relationship, especially since rumors started flying that Taza had actually been poisoned.
A mountain of toys to fulfill many wishes must be carried across all roads.
As far as Jur and Geronimo were concerned, they took the rest of the Chiricahua and made their way to New Mexico. Unbeknownst to Geronimo, he had just made a new mortal enemy, John Clum. Not that it made much difference to Geronimo to have one extra man who wanted him dead, but, well, who was John Clum, and why did he have it in for the Badonki warrior? Well, Clum was the Indian agent who negotiated the deal to relocate the Apache to the San Carlos reservation. Initially, both Jur and Tassa were willing to move, but then Geronimo came along and talked Jur out of it. If Clum would have managed to get all the Chiricahua to settle in the reservation peacefully, it would have been a major boon for his career, and he would have gotten away with it. So if it wasn't for that pesky Geronimo. Anyway, now Clum's plan went to hell, and he wanted the Apache warrior dead as a consolation prize. It wasn't hard for him to track Geronimo down, especially after he got a few Apache scouts to rat him out. Geronimo and the rest of the Chiricahua were on the Oyo Caliente reservation, living alongside the Warm Springs Apache, led by Chief Victoria. Clum set up a trap for the unsuspecting Geronimo, who had no idea he was being pursued, and managed to capture him alive without the need for violence, likely to Clum's disappointment, since he would have appreciated it, and the Nonkoy leader had given him a reason to strike him down right then. There. Well, he didn't, and Geronimo was brought in shackles to the San Carlos reservation, where Clum's dissatisfaction continued. Undoubtedly, he was hoping for a speedy execution for the Apache rebel, but he didn't get one. Maybe for the first time ever, bureaucracy saved the day, as Geronimo's sentence was delayed while the Department of War and the Bureau of Indian Affairs bickered over who had jurisdiction over the Chiricahua. After a few days, Geronimo saw an opportunity to escape, and he took it. As it turned out, Clum didn't hate him enough to go through all of that again, so instead he simply resigned from his post. The early 1880s were a very violent and active period for the Apache, one that helped seal their reputation as one of the most dangerous Native American nations in the United States. On the run from the law, many Chiricahua crossed the border into Mexico and hid out in the Sierra Madre Mountains. There, Geronimo was joined by other famed warriors such as Jur, Chief Nana, and the ironically named Bun. They often led raids along the border. Ranches, wagon trains, merchants, prospectors. The Apache attacked them all without mercy or hesitation, and usually left no survivors to prevent their location from being discovered. Even so, the Chiricahua couldn't remain hidden forever, and the trail of bodies they left in their wake put them on a collision course with both the Mexican and American armies. One way or another, 1883 saw the violence between the three groups come to a head. First, there was the older, more bitter rivalry between the Apache and the Mexicans, which ended in an all-out battle in the mountains in the state of Sonora. As Geronimo scouted the enemy, he heard the Mexican general instruct his men to kill every single Apache, men, women, and children, and warned that any deserters would be shot on sight. With little to lose, Geronimo signaled the start of the battle by killing the general with a well-placed shot. The fighting lasted all day, from sunup to sundown, with the Mexican troops wavering and rallying several times. Eventually, a few Chiricahua managed to sneak behind enemy lines and set fire to the long grass behind the Mexican army. The chaos that ensued allowed the Apache to flee into the mountains. Geronimo claimed that was the last time he ever fought the Mexicans. Surprisingly, the American army had an uncharacteristically tempered approach, trying to find a peaceful resolution to their conflict with the Apache. Sure, they'd started a few skirmishes first, they didn't carry all of that ammo for nothing after all, but eventually they negotiated for the Chiricahua to return to the reservation. This was mainly due to the man in charge, General George Crook, who was somewhat of a civil rights advocate for Native Americans at a time when such a position could sink a political or military career. There was a begrudging respect between him and the Apache leaders. They referred to him as Tan Wolf and considered him a good enemy and a worthy adversary. Meanwhile, Crook describes the Chiricahua Apache as acuteness of sense, perfect physical condition, absolute knowledge of locality, almost absolute ability to persevere from danger. We have before us the tiger of the human species. In his memoirs, Geronimo gave a much harsher opinion on George Crook. He didn't trust him, and he thought that the general wanted him dead. Indeed, while it sounds like the two descriptions might be at odds with each other, that's not really the case. Even some who wanted peace with the Chiricahua would have realized that probably have an easier time if some kind of unfortunate accident got Geronimo out of the way, since he was often the main instigator. Anyway, Crook never attempted anything of the sort, so we can only speculate on his true intentions. What we do know is that Geronimo and some of his warriors changed their minds and turned back, while the other Chiricahua were taken to a new reservation called Turkey Creek. Eventually, Geronimo made his way there about a year later, but life on the reservation didn't stick this time either. In 1886, he instigated another escape, even though this time only a few dozen had actually followed him, perhaps a sign that more and more of them were getting tired of life on the run. Like before, Geronimo defaulted to his tried and true tactic of retreating into the Sierra Madre Mountains. Crook actually caught up to him one last time and persuaded him to surrender again. Geronimo agreed, but became convinced that he would be hanged when he reached the reservation, so he fled for the third time. This was one failure too many, and President Grover Cleveland